Beautiful and Wise, Book 1 of the More Than Conquerors series by Anna Carr, read by Anna Carr. Copyright 2019 by the author. This book is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to individuals living or dead is coincidental. No part of this book can be reproduced or used in any form without permission from the author, except by reviewers who may quote brief passages in a review. Chapter 1, 2.5 Decades. Eliza Burroughs Thompson found herself saying farewell to her family as she prepared to board the train to Boston in December 1890 to visit her eldest daughter, Lydia, and her family. Eliza had come west from New York when she was in her mid-20s, and she had traveled to Omaha in the territory of Nebraska in 1860. Eliza had worked as a hat maker at a shop owned by the Virginian-born Victoria Hamilton. While in Omaha, Eliza had met Jonathan Thompson, a fur trader, who lived on a ranch located on the Dakota Territory and Territory of Nebraska border. Mr. Thompson was the son of an English fur trader, Byron Thompson, and his mail-order Scottish wife, Mary. Jonathan also had a Lakota half-brother, Burning Embers. Mr. Thompson trapped, lived on his land, and twice a year he would travel to Omaha to sell his furs. Eliza had adopted her young cousins, Lydia and John Thomas Davies, when they were 10 years old and 7 years old, respectively, while she lived in Omaha. Jonathan would bring John and Lydia treats when he came to the shop to see Eliza. Jonathan then moved part-time to Omaha to court Eliza. About a year after he moved to Omaha, Eliza and Jonathan were married, and they moved back to his ranch with their 2 children. 30 years had passed since Eliza's arrival on the plains, and the Thompson family had grown. Eliza and Jonathan had Hepzibah, who they called Ziba, 7 years into their marriage. When Ziba was 4, Eliza gave birth to 2 healthy twin sons, Dan and Burroughs. 2 years later, Eliza found herself pregnant again, and she and Jonathan welcomed their 6th child, Charlotte. Jonathan continued to trap, and he also ranched on a manageable scale. He and Eliza raised their children, and Eliza also opened a haberdashery with a millinery department in the town nearby. The family had altered tremendously in the last 7 years. Not all for the better, and not all for the worse, Jonathan said whenever Eliza found herself sighing over the current situation of things. Lydia had moved to Boston with her husband, a lawyer, where they were raising their 2 sons. Lydia was currently pregnant with their 3rd child, and Eliza and Jonathan enjoyed the multiple blessings of being grandparents to 2 wonderful boys and looked forward in anticipation to the birth of their 3rd grandchild. John Thomas Davies was a newspaper reporter on unpopular social issues. His work took him all over the country and the globe. John had become known for his articles on social injustice. He and his colleague, Betsael Merari, shared an apartment in New York. However, John spent most of his time traveling, and he had taken a 2-year tour of Europe recently, arriving back in the States. He would send his articles to Mr. Merari, who would proof them and make any necessary additions before submitting the article in both their names to the New York Times. Because of the busy schedule John kept, it had been 6 years since he had been home. John's absence had saddened the rest of the family greatly, as all missed him. Ziba was 19, and she was strong and capable. She enjoyed helping to keep the home fires burning, which was her current aspiration and purpose. Burroughs and Dan were nearly 15. Burroughs was quiet, helpful, always listening and watching others, and always willing to lend a hand when it was needed. Dan felt that people would do right if only shown right, and that it was his job to show them the way. Though the brothers were varied in demeanor, they were the best of brothers and the best of friends. Lottie was 7, and she looked like her mother with her brown hair and blue eyes. She was quiet and introverted, and though she conversed best with Burroughs, Dan was more protective of her, and the 2 brothers would follow her, Burroughs talking, Dan guarding, and both loving the baby of the family. At the moment, Jonathan was ensuring that Eliza's baggage was secure on the train, and he came toward her with a reassuring smile. "Well, that's it," he said as he placed a hand gently on her shoulder as Richard Raitt, the station master, came out of his office and walked toward the Thompson family. "The train will be leaving soon," Richard declared. It was then Eliza looked up at Jonathan questioningly. "Ye just take care of Lydia, and let us know when the baby arrives," Jonathan said with an encouraging smile. Dan then chimed in with a sigh. 9 months is sure a long time to wait for something, he stated, shaking his head in a mournful way as all save him laughed, and Daniel Evans, the local sheriff, came up, tussling his namesake's hair. "Only feels that way, Dan," Mr. Evans said with a laugh before turning to Eliza and extending his hand. "Good luck, Eliza," he finished. "Thank you, Daniel," Eliza replied with a smile. Daniel Evans was married to Harriet, and they had twin daughters, Eliza E. and Olivia. Harriet was a good woman who possessed unwavering surety, and she had been Eliza's dear friend for the past 20 years. Dan was also a friend of the family, and he took Ziba, Dan, Burroughs, Lottie, and his 2 daughters for hikes and rides with Jonathan. As the final boarding whistle blew, Ziba, Dan, Burroughs, and Lottie said farewell to their mother. "Take care of yourself," Jonathan said as he helped Eliza onto the train. "I will," Eliza replied as she let go of her husband's hand and climbed aboard the locomotive. As Eliza sat down with her handbag, she looked back through the window at those who waved goodbye at her and at the Dakota town. Victoria Hamilton had married and moved with her husband from Omaha to the town near the Thompsons' ranch, where the couple ran a mercantile. Judas Fairbanks ran the hotel, and his wife Jezebel ran the school. A Harvey restaurant, 2 new hotels, and a hospital ran by Dr. Aaron Cohen, who had recently arrived from New York, had opened. Yes, there had been progress on the plains as the Dakota Territory had become part of the states of the North and South Dakota in 1889. Notwithstanding, there has also been cruelty in the death of Crazy Horse, who had been stabbed in the back at nearby Fort Robinson in Nebraska. However, it was early December 1890, and perhaps peace on earth could be achieved as America came ever closer to the 20th century. Despite the changes, not all for the better, not all for the worst, the past, the present, and the future blended together, like one of those modern impressionist paintings Eliza had seen the last time she was in Boston at an art gallery. Tiny dots and squares of color that looked blurry up close, yet fit perfectly together when stepped back from, when given the right perspective. As Eliza looked out of the train window and waved goodbye, she realized yet again how blessed she was. Her husband, 4 of their children, and a friend were waving her off and would be waiting for her when she came back. What a difference 2.5 decades can make, Eliza thought as she waved farewell.